In this video I am building the Ford 9N tug tractor from Tamiya's 1/48 scale Corsair kit. Needless to say, there are going to be some scratch build improvements, painting and weathering. Get comfortable because the build starts right now. Hello fellas, I will start this build by cleaning up and assembling some parts. Being a Tamiya product, this kit is very well engineered and fits together rather nicely. The level of detail is quite decent, but the bug keeps biting me and I will spend quite a lot of time adding details. Hopefully you will appreciate it. Before we go into the scratch building, let me tell you how you can save 10% of your next scale model related purchase. The sponsor of this video, Freetime Hobbies, is offering a 10% discount of your first purchase. The only thing you need to do is to visit the link down in the description and use the code on checkout. Watch this video until the end and then go show the guys at Freetime Hobbies some love. Now let's do some detail work. I noticed that the fenders are separate panels, so I scraped the panel line where it was appropriate. Also, I cut out an opening on each side for some pedals that Tamiya omitted in the kit. I made the pedals from pieces of paperclip cut to size and bent to shape. For the footstep, I used the metal from leftover photo etch fret. Small detail, but it adds to the overall appearance of the model. Using my very sophisticated punch and die tool, I punched out and glued the fasteners that hold the fenders in place, as well as some massive rivets on the rear end on the tractor. Smash the like button so we can impress the YouTube algorithm. The grill area has the thickness of an armor plate. To improve the appearance of that part, first I made the openings appear thinner by removing the excess plastic with an oversized drill bit. Needless to say, a mistake would have been very unfortunate event. Then I sanded the edges using a file until their thickness become acceptable. The part over the engine is actually the fuel tank. As you may know, fuel tanks usually form a complete enclosure, which was not the case here. That's why I went ahead and made the lower wall of the fuel tank. To make things a bit more interesting, the floor has a bit of a shape going on, because it has to accept some parts from the engine side. Using thin plastic card, I glued the internal floor first, then I glued the lower portion. Finally, I bridged the two surfaces with another plastic piece. After some careful trimming and sanding, I applied AK white modeling putty. Since it's water-based acrylic resin, it is possible to wipe the excess off with moistened Q-tip. This is very handy in tight spaces. Every water-cooled engine needs some sort of heat exchanger. Tamiya decided that this is too obscure, I guess, to be included in the kit, so they skipped it. I did not have anything suitable in the parts bin, so I went ahead and made my own by scribing parallel grooves, one by one. I cut the piece into small sections and glued them together so I can have grooves facing both ways. After installation, I think it's pretty visible and will look nice with a coat of silver and some black wash. The radiator fan had to be scratch built. I started off by simply twisting the ends of 3 lengths of brass cut out of 4/8 fret. Then I glued them together with equalish angles between each blade. I glued a plastic washer from the parts bin to them. Then I added a plastic rod. To fit this assembly to the engine, I drilled a hole and glued the rod in. I was not very happy with the way these blades looked, so I went ahead and added wider blades from sheet plastic. Now I think it looks much better. Continuing to add details to the engine, I did not add the details in the best sequence, but I discovered them on pictures and some things were more obvious than others. First, I added a coolant hose that goes from the head to the radiator. Then I added another hose that goes from the steering column to the head. I have no idea what is the purpose of this hose. Both are from soldering wire. Next, I added what I believe to be a ignition relay and a copper cable towards the starter motor. Then I added another copper wire running from the relay towards the dashboard area where the ignition key is located. Then I added some kind of control rod. I guess it is for throttle application, but I may be wrong. Next, I added another cooling hose in front of the engine going to the radiator area. Finally, I drilled holes for the spark plug slits and made those from copper wire and soldering wire. Another missing detail was what I believe to be a parking brake. So I joined two pieces of plastic card to obtain the necessary thickness. Then I drew the shape and trimmed the plastic accordingly. Then I added some details and the connecting rods to complete the handbrake assembly. Unfortunately, I cannot glue it right now to the drivetrain because I will not be able to slide the fenders over it, so I'll have to paint this separately. The final detail of the engine area is a fuel filter and was a back and forth process. Using my Dremel tool as a lathe, I turned a piece of clear sprue to get something similar to what I have in my reference material. Then I drilled a hole in it, glued a wire and painted it in clear orange so it looks like there is some fuel in it, and I called it done. However, it kept bugging me that this detail is just too big for a fuel filter and looks more like a garbage truck light. So the next day I stretched some of the same clear sprue and turned it again to get a significantly smaller detail. I gave it the same treatment as previously and it looks much better now. On the steering column there is a small lever, a selector of some sort, with a graduated bar underneath it. I replicated that by shaping a soldering wire and then squishing the arched portion of it between two flat surfaces. The lever I made out of stretch sprue that I melted at the end. Also, I did a small piece of plastic on the fuel cap, just cause I can see similar shape on the pictures. I added some additional structure to the driver's seat using copper wire. Also, I added another seat behind the driver's seat. I made that by cutting a piece of plastic sheet to size, and then I did the padding using regular yellow-grey milliput. The edges I smoothed down using my fingers, and also I added some relief to the seat using a Q-tip. It will help if the Q-tip is damp. Everything is ready for paint. First comes a layer of Mr. Surfacer 1500 Black. I have tried zenithal priming before, but only on cockpits and never on a whole model. So the idea is to simulate a light source, usually directly above the object, using black primer and light paint. So I sprayed white directly on top of the model together with the figure. Before painting the light grey, I masked the wheels so I don't overspray the rubber parts. First I applied a few light layers of grey, being careful not to hide too much of the zenithal priming. Then I added a bit of white, and using the pictures of the zenithal priming, I added subtle highlights. The technique would have given much better results if the model was not grey, but it is what it is. Now it is time to add some color. Not that it is much, but it's very welcome. I got a rusty tone for the exhaust. I painted the starter relay and the radiator in silver, as well as some hose clamps and the spark plugs. Black with dark grey highlights for the seats, the steering wheel and the starter motor, the spark plug leads and the fuel cap. The most vibrant color went on the cable that connects the starter motor with the relay. Now let's see how the extreme highlights will work. Using a color a lot lighter than the base coat, I highlighted all edges, because edges naturally collect more light than the surrounding surfaces. It may seem a bit cartoonish, but we need this high contrast because the subsequent weathering will tone it down. Time to start the weathering, and I think that those little tug tractors did live a tough life on them aircraft carrier decks. So I will do some chipping, but this time using only a brush. So to start things, I added a touch of black to the RLM66 and started to do the superficial scratches. I added some paint drying retarder to the mix so the paint stays usable for longer time period. So this might be a bit controversial, but there you go, some rust. I imagine that the salty humid air on board of an aircraft carrier will make any untreated metal corrode. As usual, this will get toned down by the subsequent weathering. Before I continue with the weathering, I added some decals that I forgot about. Next I applied a weathering wash, focusing on the corners and the recessed areas. I would like to say thank you to all the people supporting me over on Patreon. It's great to have you guys. When the wash was dry, I easily removed it using a cotton bud. So tires. That's always hard because just looking around on the streets I can see so many different weathering patterns that I cannot draw a definitive conclusion. So I went for this weathering pattern without any real reason and justification. Here is what I did. First I applied a sky grey panel line wash on the tire sidewall next to the rim. Then I blended towards the edge, but being careful to get a very short yet smooth transition between the rim line and the black sidewall. Next, using a buff oil brusher, I highlighted the edge of the tire and then blended that. Final weathering steps. Using Starship Field Oil Brusher, I added a layer of light grey dirt in the area where the driver puts its feet. Then I used Starship Base Sludge Oil Brusher to simulate more oily dirt near the engine and drivetrain in general. same color I use for some fuel spills around the fuel cap. Despite all the additional details, assembling the model is quite easy, and I cannot point out a single issue. Make sure you stick around because next video is going to take us through the assembly and painting of the figure. If you find my builds interesting, watch more of my videos. I'll put a couple of playlists for you. Thank you for watching to the end, and until next time, happy modeling!